Welcome to Alchemical Science. I'm Jordan Collin, an independent researcher, an alchemist, and a student of the inventor and vortex fusion specialist Malcolm Bendall. So welcome back to the second part in our Alpha and Omega Ladder series of lectures, interviews, and announcements. This time we'll be following up with an interview I conducted with Dr. Robert Haralick, who in part one of the series lectured on water coherence domains, the birth of plasmoids, the frequencies of the elements, and his other related research in a side venue at TeslaTech Extraordinary Energy Conference in 2025 in the US just this month. If you didn't manage to catch Robert's lecture, that's fine. You can always go back and watch it after this video. They can be viewed as standalone sessions in any particular order. But I hope you'll consider taking the time to watch both. We've hit a significant milestone in the scientific understanding of plasmoids and the stepwise process of transmutation, and there is so much information packed into this series, so many questions answered that people have been asking for a long time now. Aside from the advances in the science, if you listen carefully to the whole series, of which there will be a new video published every couple of days for the next few weeks, you will hear my guests drop a number of big hints and updates on the progress of the mass production and the commercialization of the Thunderstorm Generator, the Indian float, the involvement and interest from government, military, and academic institutions. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you'll be notified of the new videos as they are released. A couple last bits of housekeeping before we move on to my interview with Robert. Remember to check out the links in the description. I provided links to strikefoundation.earth, the website which contains all of Malcolm Bendall's notes, lectures, and research, where you can also download or print a copy of the newly released Alpha and Omega Ladder diagram, which details the stepwise transmutation process that we're going to be talking about in this series. And you'll also find Professor Haralick's website, haralick.org, which contains many details about this distinguished scientist and his work. And also the link to Alpha Prospect's website is there too. They are the commercial licensees of the Thunderstorm Generator, and you can sign up to their newsletter or contact them there to keep up to date with the official announcements on that side of things. Lastly, the best-selling Australian writer and author of The Shaman, the book based on Malcolm Bendall's life, is releasing a new book. This is Roland Perry we're talking about at the end of September, and it's titled Oliphant. This book details the life and works of the Australian physicist Sir Mark Oliphant, who actually discovered how the atomic bomb could be built in his collaborations with the likes of Rutherford and Oppenheimer. So this is going to be a seriously interesting insight into the history of this science, and you can pre-order the book now on Amazon or from retailers worldwide. So you can follow the link in the description to Amazon or simply Google Roland Perry Oliphant to find it. So let us now continue with our interview with Dr. Robert Haralick. I hope you get a lot out of this. I certainly did. Hello, I'm here today with Dr. Robert Haralick. He is a distinguished professor emeritus in the PhD program in computer science at the Graduate Center City of New York. Professor Haralick is responsible for developing the grayscale coherence texture analysis technique and the facet model technique for imaging processing. In high-level computer vision, he's worked out robust methods for photo and development fast algorithms for solving a consistent labeling problem. He's also developed shape analysis and extraction techniques using mathematical morphology and morphological sampling theorem and fast recursive morphology algorithms. Sorry, that's a bit of a mouthful. In the area of document imaging understanding, Professor Haralick has developed a comprehensive ground truth set of some 1,600 document image pages, mostly in English, and some 200 pages in Japanese. He's also developed algorithms for document image skew, angle estimation, zone delineation, word and text, line bounding, box delineation. He's worked in the area of computer vision performance, characterization, and covariance propagation. In the area of medical image processing, Professor Haralick has worked with left ventricle boundary delineation in X-ray, ventriculograms, and 3D. And Professor Haralick is a fellow of the IEEE for his contributions in computer vision and image processing, and a fellow of the IAPR for his contributions in pattern recognition, image processing, and for service to the IAPR. He's published over 650 papers and served as the president for the International Association of Pattern Recognition. And his publication record can be found on Google Scholar which by their own count has received over 85,000 citations to his papers in scientific literature. So the citations are, even for this year, increasing over 2,000 citations a year. And at the end of 2021, Professor Haralick retired from the City University of New York after 52 years of being on university faculties, in about 40 of those years as distinguished professor. He retired to set up his own laboratory for research on the new emerging science of water, and he wants to do experiments to show that a person's conscious intention can change the water and can change, and the change in water can be detected by the sensitive instruments in his laboratory. And that's why we are here today, and how Robert and I have connected is through water, and how this relates to Malcolm Bendall's Thunderstorm Generator and the process of transmutation, the Alpha Omega ladder. So that's a very long introduction. Welcome, Robert. Thank you for coming to speak to me today, but there's a lot to say about you.
My goodness, I hear all of that, and I think, how is it possible that that kind of a mountain was actually climbed? I look at it now, and it's unclimbable.
You didn't do it again now.
Yeah, what's interesting really is that some people go and they do research, and they want to take I'm talking about university people. And the research, of course, has implications for society, because it then gets turned into products, instruments that are of service to the society.
Hmm.
And my point of view was always that whatever I did would be of service. And I never tried to get tied to a product to earn additional money. Everything I did was put out for the scientific community to use. And that's what happened.
Yeah, it's clear that it has been used, and much of your research has been applied in many different fields of science, and that's how it should go. So I guess my own little introduction there is that Robert is one of the scientists I most admire in the world, and his research into this field. Hey, come on, I'm sure you get that all the time.
Goodness.
Well, I think this is some of the things we're going to touch on. We're following up from TeslaTech 2025, the conference that happens every year, and this is where the Thunderstorm Generator was launched a couple of years ago to the public, and Robert has been involved for a very long time and been presenting there, I think, pretty much every year. For how long now, Robert? Pretty much since its foundation?
You're talking about TeslaTech?
TeslaTech, yeah.
Yeah, probably from maybe 15 years.
Yeah, okay, so around 15 years. Long enough. They all blur together, but at any rate, a really long time. And that's probably a good place to start off with, is that's what this conference has been about for a long time, and a lot of different radical and new ideas have been presented there. And obviously plasmoids have been discussed for a long time, water's been discussed for a long time, ideas like transmutation, free energy, so-called, all of this. But what you've spoken about before is the advancement of the science, and advancing the science rather than impeding the science. So I wanted to start off with that. And on your presentation this year with is tidal water. Oh yeah,
I can put a frame around that.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is something very new, and it's not in the textbooks. And what happens in those kind of areas in science, where science itself doesn't even have the fundamentals that relate to the kind of things that are being observed. So you have experiments, you have demonstrations, and it doesn't make any sense according to science. What happens in those instances? So the leaders in science, the people who have trained so many years, who have done so much research and so much contributions, they have two paths they can take. One of which, well, your experiments don't agree with the current science. You have a flaw in the experiments. Go redo it. Go fix up the flaw or whatever. The other, hold on, with that assumes that the science is complete and true, and that the observations from the experiment are not true. When you do that, you actually impede the science. Because if you start the other way, assume that the observations, the experiment, that is correct, and then go to the theory and expand the theory in the science so that it now takes care of those cases which it hadn't before. When that happens, you have an advancement of science. And what we have with the thunderstorm generator is exactly this kind of a thing. If you really want to advance the science, you start from the observations and you change the theory, you enlarge the theory so it includes more cases. So this is the situation with the thunderstorm generator. It has observations, demonstrations, which have been repeatedly done in many countries, with many people, with many different engines, and the observations are all similar.
Yeah, and we've both been personally there to witness several of those demonstrations ourselves and some of the testing that's being done.
Yes, exactly. And so you have to start from there if you want to advance the science. So let's talk about the beginning of the thunderstorm generator, and in terms of what goes on first, what goes on second. So what goes on first is a bubbler. The air intake is essentially put through water, or bubbles through water, with some kind of a mesh to make the bubbles smaller. There are a variety of ways of doing this. And the bubbles rise up when they're large, then when they're small, they cavitate. And this is the beginning part of what goes on in the thunderstorm generator. So what's so interesting about it? In order to understand what's really going on, we have to backtrack and understand water. Water is not a one-phase liquid. When I went to school, water, H2O, the molecules are floating around in some kind of a Brownian motion, sometimes colliding with one another. And that was sort of the end of the story. The new science, the new emerging science of water, is that water is a two-phase liquid. Where did this science come from? It began with an atomic physicist who was very well known, Giuliano Preparata, in the 1980s. And he began work on condensed matter. Water is an instance of that. And his theory showed that the water itself can form coherence domains. These are small in size, having like 5-6 million molecules of water. And inside that coherence domain, the molecules of water are all oscillating together. Up, down, up, down, up, down. I'll explain that in a moment. And that changes the properties of water. Now, the interesting part is, why is it that the molecules get into this state? What is it that causes it? And here we have to turn to the random fluctuations of the vacuum. If you think about it in the Bohr atom kind of model from the 1900s, you would say particles, antiparticles, they pop into existence, they're there for a certain time, and they pop out of existence. From the quantum point of view, it's not quite particles, they're waveforms, and everything is expressed in terms of the waveform, and it's a little harder in the language to include all of that. So we'll recognize that everything is in waveforms, but the picture is more easily told by thinking about it as particles. Now, when the particle pops into existence, it's carrying energy. It carries that energy by some kind of oscillation. So, for example, a photon is carrying an energy because of the frequency with which it oscillates. Same thing for these particles that pop into existence. So they're carrying energy. Most of the time, the energy is low. Sometimes you'll find a particle popping into existence with very high energy, but the probability of that happening is small. The energy generally is low, and it's a kind of energy that has high entropy. High entropy means the energy is disordered. In the classical physics, which I learned, what happens is the universe is going to shut down because all of the energy is not going to be available to be used because it has high entropy. In other words, everything is going to be some distribution of temperature, and it's going to be a wide distribution of temperature, but you're not going to be able to use the energy. So that's the situation of the random quantum fluctuations. Now we see something happen which is unexpected and which comes about from Preparata's work. Let's take the example of an electron in a hydrogen atom, which is part of an H2O water molecule. Suppose the electron starts in this process in the innermost orbit. That's the orbit that has the smallest energy. Mm-hmm. To jump to the next orbit, it has to have an increase of energy. And actually, from the quantum field point of view, they use the word orbit, but they don't think of the orbit as an electron going around a circle around the nucleus. They think of the orbit as an energy. It's a different energy level when you're in that orbit. Mm-hmm. To go from the first orbit, the innermost orbit, to the next orbit requires the electron to absorb energy. Now there's a resonance effect. When the particle pops into existence and has exactly the energy that's required for the electron to go from where it is to the next higher energy orbit, it's a resonance effect and the electron absorbs that energy. And this happens from orbit to orbit to orbit until the electron is finally at the outer orbit. This process is a ratchet process. It's like you're walking up the stairs, step by step by step, you come to the top of the landing. It doesn't reverse. And when you get to the top, the outside, outermost orbit, the energy of that electron is around 12 electron volts. Electron volt is a unit of energy. It's a minuscule unit, very small.
Mhm.
Has 12 electron volts. The energy needed for the electron to separate from its proton, we're talking about the hydrogen atom and the electron, is around 12.6 electron volts. And so if you have some thermal energy that happens to hit the electron will then get to the next higher level, which allows it to separate from the proton. This separation doesn't mean it flies to Venus. It doesn't mean it goes across the Earth to, 1,000 miles away. It stays close to the nucleus. Actually, it's now called a quasi-electron. But it's not in a rigid orbit. All of this says something about how things are going on. And it's oscillating at a higher frequency, because the higher your frequency you oscillate at, the higher energy you're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Now what happens? You have these million molecules of water. Oh, before I go to that, I said the particle comes from the vacuum. Where is the vacuum? You have a glass of water. Tell me where the vacuum is in the glass of water. The whole glass is filled. There's no place for anything. Oh, I see liquid every place, right?
Yeah, well, vacuum's an interesting word.
Well, it's an interesting word from one point of view. It means the vacuum has nothing, and what we now know is the vacuum is full.
Well, that's Malcolm's 0360, isn't it? And he was just talking to me on the phone before, and he said, make sure you quote me and say about from a glass of water, we can transmute the first 32 elements and we can boil all of the oceans of the world just with the power in that glass. So I'll throw that in now just so we've mentioned it.
Yes.
But sorry, go on.
So between one molecule of water and its neighbor, you don't have water.
Hmm.
It's a
So what do we have? Yeah, and
vacuum.
and would we call this the ether? For anyone out there who likes old terminology, or how do you think that idea is developed, or is it different? What you're talking about, is it the same?
The ether is real, and it has its own properties. But the explanation, as I'm trying to go over it, does not involve ether. Other things will involve ether, but at this point,
So we're talking a step on when we're talking about the vacuum. We're talking about something that's already started to be in movement and have some kind of form or property or energy.
yes. So
In an AC sense.
the electron of the hydrogen atom of the water molecule has absorbed energy, and it's at the outer orbit, and all of the molecules of water, the oxygen atom and the hydrogen atoms, they're all now doing an oscillation. How did that happen? Because when one more water molecule, when that electron of the hydrogen atom picks up some additional energy and finally makes its way to the outer orbit, it starts its own oscillation from excited state, outer orbit, to the innermost orbit, the lowest energy, then to the highest energy, to the lowest energy. It's oscillating like that. But it's happening to every one of the hydrogen atom electrons, and it's happening with the oxygen atom electrons. But each one has begun its journey at a different time. So it's like taking a whole large set of pendulums and getting each one, putting it into motion, and you're on a table, and you start each one at a different moment in time. So while one pendulum is to the right, the other pendulum is in the middle, and another pendulum is going towards the left. So they're all,
and they all come into sync eventually.
and when it's on the table, indeed, it's exactly what happens, because they're all locally in some way connected together. There's a very, very tiny amount of energy because of their local, they're positioned locally. All the oscillators, all the pendulums come to be in the same phase. So now they're all swinging to the left, and then they swing to the right, and so on. And that's what happens to these electrons.
So these are our coherence domains in water.
This is what happens. Yeah. Right. This is what happens in the coherence domain. And it's totally, from the point of view of the classical science, it's totally unexpected. And now think about it from the entropy point of view. Before, every one of the electrons is doing its own thing. It's not oscillating from the outer orbit to the inner orbit, high energy, low energy. It's just sort of doing its own thing. We started with essentially low energy, high entropy. That's energy you can't use. Now all those water molecules in the coherence domain, they're going up and down, up and down, up and down in phase. That's ordered. That means low entropy. And it's not staying around its lower energy level. It's oscillating from the high energy level to the lower energy level. What's happened is its energy is now at a higher level because of the oscillation. So we started with something that had high entropy, low energy. We're ending with something that has low entropy and high energy. That's a neg entropy process. It's the opposite of the universe running down, where everything then has low energy and high entropy. It's just the opposite.
And you're not necessarily adding energy into the equation to get this result. Well, I guess you are.
It happens naturally.
Yeah, it's happening on its own. We see it in nature, and we see it in things like the Thunderstorm Generator and the bubbler. And these are the processes that we're beginning to replicate and see here.
Yeah, even the glass of water that you have from your tap. It's happening there, and there's no effort that's needed to make it happen. It's part of the quantum field process. So these are small domains on the order of, at room temperature, something like 70 nanometers. And the properties of the water in the coherence domain are different than in the incoherent water, which is the model that I initially spoke of, that the water molecules are just floating around, sometimes bumping into each other, and there's a Brownian motion. That's the incoherent water. And the coherence domains are populating with the incoherent water, and each has a fraction. So the common fractions that we might have at normal temperatures, maybe 40, 50% of the volume is coherent, and then whatever 100% minus that percent would be the incoherent water. And theoretically calculated, the properties of the water in the coherence domains are different. They're different because things, if they flow in a laminar flow. They flow without things bumping into each other. And in the coherence domains themselves, they have a core, and they have something that is just outside the core, but inside the coherence domain. In the core of the coherence domain, there are no ions. In the shell around the core, we're still in the coherence domains, are ions. And the ions in that shell do not move in Brownian motion. It's all in a laminar flow motion. So we have something that's going on that is unusual from the point of view of classical chemistry, classical physics.
Which brings us to the birth of plasmoids, I guess, and why.
First, I got to get to.
Well, yeah, sorry, yeah, please go on. Let me skip it.
So this is what's happening in the bubbler. Coherence domains are forming just like they form in a glass of ordinary water. Then we have the bubbles. The bubbles are small bubbles. The small bubbles don't rise to the surface and explode like larger bubbles. They more or less stay where they are. They float around a little bit, and they cause the water to be cloudy. And if you look at the water in the bubbler, it indeed is cloudy.
Almost a kind of milky white or a frothy gray color.
Yeah. So this is caused by the small bubbles. The bubbles themselves are negative on the outside and positive on the inside. And when you disturb those bubbles, they cavitate. Now, how is the bubbler being disturbed? The bubbler is mounted in a way that it essentially is getting the vibrations from the engine. That's a disturbance. And then, how does the engine work? There's a phase in the cycle of the engine where it's taking in air, which means it's drawing the air through the bubbler. That itself, turning on, turning off, turning on, turning off, depending upon what part of the cycle of the engine you're looking at.
So AC oscillation, Malcolm talks about so much, yeah.
Yes, so you have two kinds of disturbance for those bubbles. And because of that disturbance, the bubbles cavitate. They get smaller and smaller until they disappear. And the inside charges and the outside charges of the bubble meet and cause an electrical phenomena. Okay, so now the shape of the coherence domains, we assume that they are like a donut, a torus. Many of the diagrams that people would use in various papers that talk about the coherence domains, it looks like they're a sphere. They sometimes show circles, and circles are the sort of a two-dimensional projection of a sphere. But actually, it's the case that, at least according to our hypothesis, it's a torus, and a torus has slightly different properties than the sphere would. And so the tori of these coherence domains, they will stack up, let's say, in a vertical direction. They'll stack up one on top of the other. Mm-hmm. And inside the ring of the torus, you have a magnetic field. That magnetic field has a direction, because you have like little, if you want to think of it like little magnets, there's a north and a south. And throughout the ring, all the norths and souths, they line up. A north connects to a south, connects to a north, if you were to think of about it as magnets. Mm-hmm. But actually what it is there's a direction for the magnetic field. And if it's in a ring, if it's in a torus, that direction is either clockwise or counterclockwise, looking at the torus from above.
Yeah.
So it turns out that the stable configuration is two of the tori line up, one to the left, one to the right. One is going in a clockwise direction and the other is going in a counterclockwise direction. And they're next to each other. What is Malcolm's model for the plasmoid? One side clockwise, the other side counterclockwise.
That's the basis of this theory.
But the two tori are just neighbors to each other. They sort of touch each other on the outside. It's not a plasmoid yet. Mm-hmm. Now comes let's just call it for the moment, the electric spark, or you think of it just as an electromagnetic field, which is spherical in shape. And if you want to think about it with a model, take a ball and put needles every place in the ball. Just stick them in so the other end of the needle is pointing towards the center of the ball. So you sort of have like a porcupine ball. These represent the directions the rays will go from the discharge when the positive charges and the negative charges meet. They go out in all directions. So they go out in all directions, and some of the time, one of those rays hits exactly the point where the two tori meet of the coherence domain, and they fuse those coherence domains together. And when they do that, that is the plasmoid.
Right.
So these plasmoids now go to the flow up along with the air, and they get into the engine. And in the engine, they absorb additional energy because they'll carry some of the ions which are happening because the engine makes all kinds of gas. Actually, mainly for a perfect engine, it would be carbon dioxide and H2O, but H2O in the steam form. And because it's so hot, it makes them into ions. and whatever else that might have been in the air.
Mhm.
And so the plasmoids are carrying ions from the exhaust, and then they go round and round between a central sphere and an outer sphere in an anti-clockwise direction. That's when they come out. And the bubbles, they go around in a shell between the most inside sphere and the middle sphere. But they are going around in a clockwise direction.
So that's our cold stream going in clockwise, and then the exhaust coming out anti-clockwise on the outer
Now
sphere.
we have, and when they go around the sphere, one is going one direction, the other is going the other direction. There's a stainless steel central sphere, which is actually separating the two so they don't intermingle. But it's like a vortex, because of a fully formed vortex has, like a tornado, has one part of it going in clockwise direction, and then the inner part will be counterclockwise, or vice versa. And I guess that depends upon whether you're in the northern hemisphere or southern.
Yeah, the toilet or the bath plug analogy
Yes,
is
exactly.
such a great initial way to understand that. Yeah.
Yes, it's exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
And as they're doing this vortex motion, something is happening. Something is happening on the energy. And eventually the plasmoids create the ball lightning. And that ball lightning occurs in a it's very, very small. And it makes the jump from the outer sphere to the central sphere. And that's when it interacts with the carbon dioxide. It disassociates the carbon dioxide into a carbon and an oxygen, two oxygens.
Mm.
And that's where something can happen, where you have a transmutation.
Yeah. So this is the point of the process where the actual transmutation's happening. You've got the plasmoids developing from the water coherence domains in the bubbler. They're going through the process of the engine, and then they're remediating the exhaust on the other end. And of course, there's been analysis done by the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project on the 24 and 18-inch outer and inner spheres some time ago, which we've covered quite a lot. And you've been looking over those SEM images there as well. And of course, they found during the original analysis every element up to iron, essentially, at least the ones that could be found and weren't gases, and also a few over that, like nickel, zinc, molybdenum. So we're finding pretty much every element.
Yes. So
That one would
the question is, these elements, they were not in the air, and they were not in the fuel. All right. On sulfur, depending upon the fuel, some fuels might have
some,
sulfur.
but certainly not all of them. Yeah.
Absolutely not all of them. And you have elements basically that were not in the input to the engine.
Hmm.
And they're showing up using the energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy system that is part of the scanning electron microscope. They're there. That's irrefutable proof of the transmutation.
Yeah. This alone, we're already there. So it's more just really starting to explain that process and the stepwise process of transmutation that Malcolm's been referring to as the alpha and omega ladder, and the alpha ladder processes obviously known, and I'm not sure if you want to touch on that right now, but that's probably where we're leading to next is
Yes, we're
the transmutation. Yeah, how that actually happens.
how is it that these elements are forming?
Because it's not random either, as far as we can see.
So the alpha ladder process was known since the late 1950s and is certainly now taught probably in the first year physics people who are in the astronomy side of the physics. What happens in a star like our sun? It is fusing hydrogen. The result of the fusion of the hydrogen, if you go through the steps, you wind up with helium. And so as the years go on for the sun, the hydrogen is decreasing, the helium is increasing, and you reach a point in so many billion of years that there's no hydrogen left. At that point, the sun turns into a red giant and begins to fuse helium. So if I have helium and I'm fusing helium, the fusing of the helium with the elements in almost all these cases that we're thinking about releases energy. So the red giant stars are releasing energy, maybe with a slightly different spectrum than the sun does, but they're releasing heat. They're releasing light. They're releasing radiation. And this can happen. For example, a helium atom can fuse with a carbon, creating oxygen, because carbon are 3 heliums. Oxygen is 4 heliums. 2 heliums can fuse with the carbon and make neon. Neon has not been observed because there were never instruments that analyze the gas that comes out of the exhaust that include neon. So this is a hypothesis, and it will be tested within this year when the instrumentation becomes available.
Will this be your lab and your testing, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah. We will be getting essentially a mass spectrometer and an emission gas analyzer, which can do like 50 different gases. And the process used in the mass spectrometer is different from that used in the emission gas analyzer.
Yeah, so you'll be able
They're more expensive than the automobile exhaust gas analyzers, but it's all right. It needs to be done. The hypothesis needs to be tested. Now, there are multiple ways that the carbon can disappear. This is what we're talking about, because the output of the Thunderstorm Generator is low in carbon.
Yeah.
On the order of like 1% area, maybe 2%. I'm talking about when everything is working properly.
Oh yeah, it can be as low as 0 or 0.1%, but certainly it's zeroed out both carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and hydrocarbons on the best case.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the same that's being observed in all of the different tests.
Yeah, in varying degrees. There's always a massive reduction in carbon. Yeah.
Yes, and now if we talk about the outliers, sometimes the oxygen is not 17 to 21%, and it's a little lower. Why does that happen? something is out of tune.
Mhm.
Something is not working the way it's supposed to work. So these are not outliers for which there is no information. They're outliers that can be explained where something is not working correctly.
Well, and generally that's just a very simple practical thing like vacuum in the machine or, various qualities of builds are being made. So ultimately it can reduce the carbon to
Right.
to essentially nothing. And that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Now, we were talking about frequencies.
Mm.
The frequencies means we have, in this situation, resonance. What's happening is not just energy, it's coherent energy. Coherent energy acts differently than, let's just call it raw energy, or particularly the contrast is going to be explosive energy. It has a different property. Coherent energy enables things to happen at much less extreme conditions than you would need for, let's just call it explosive, non-coherent energy.
Hmm.
The helium fusing, 3 heliums fusing to carbon, for example, that happens in the red giant stars, that requires millions of degrees. And then if you go to mainstream physics and ask, well, how was fusion done in the mainstream physics world? Well, yes, it can be done in a nuclear bomb,
Hmm.
which is very explosive. But if you try to do it in a controlled way, you're in a huge reactor. The tokamak is in a big room with a big torus, very strong magnetic fields that are trying to contain a plasma where the transmutation takes place. The problem is the plasma is not coherent there in that application. It's not ordered. And so it's very hard to control. And I think even through the end of last year, of 2024, the length of time that you can hold the plasma is less than a minute.
And when we're talking about plasmoids, we're talking about structures that can condense and hold their forms and embed themselves in the engine, and it's a totally different idea of fusion, really, that we're discussing.
Yes. And it's the conditions for it is the coherence. So let me give an example of the coherence in the coherence domain, which is applicable as well to the plasmoids. We're talking about this electron from the hydrogen atom of the water. And we're talking about how it goes from the high energy to the low energy. Let's take a look at this process. Suppose at the moment that we look, it's in the inside orbit. It has low energy. And then it transitions to the outside orbit with high energy. Where did the energy come from? Because at the moment that I started, it was on the inside. I'm talking about after the coherence domains have formed. So the self-entrapped electromagnetic field is there. And when the electron is in the innermost orbit, the self-entrapped electric field is carrying, I should say the electromagnetic field is carrying high energy in that moment. Then the electron goes to the outer orbit, which has high energy. Where did it get the energy to get from the low energy port to the high energy point? It comes from the field. The field gives up the energy to the electron. And what happens when it goes from the high energy to the low energy? Where does the energy go? It goes back to the field. What we have here is resonance. It's exactly resonance. So if you're familiar with resonance in electronic circuits, it's often happening with an inductor and a capacitor, a coil and a capacitor.
This is a great analogy. Yeah.
One moment, all of the energies in the electric field of the capacitor, and then the capacitor discharges, and then it creates the magnetic field in the inductor, and then it's in the magnetic field of the inductor, and then that field discharges and it goes back to the capacitor. The business of going from one thing to another energetically is a resonance effect. Same thing happens in mechanical systems. You take a spring and a mass, and it will oscillate. Just pull the mass down from the spring, and then it goes back up, and then it goes back down. It goes up and down. You're transferring energy between the spring and the potential energy of the mass. So in systems where you have this transfer, this is a resonant effect. And on top of the resonant effect, it's not just one oscillator, but it's, in the case of the water coherence domains, 5-6 million, all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
This is a different kind of a world. Coherent. And things that happen in a coherent way it does not follow what would have to happen if you were just using incoherent energy. So incoherent energy, you needed millions of degrees. There are not million degrees any place, neither in the engine or in the spheres. Hot? Yes, it's hot.
Yeah.
But not hot.
Not that hot.
It's a few hundred degrees Celsius.
Well, and that's very curious, just a quick question on resonance, and I actually haven't had a chance to ask you, but it's quite relevant to this, is we did some experiments up in Queensland earlier this year, and we, on Malcolm's instruction, we drove the engine a little bit harder than usual, and we had the Vajra, and you've seen these pictures, and yeah, spoken about it briefly, but the Vajra was, these are the Thunderstorm Generator spheres, was glowing almost kind of purple pink. And what was really curious is a couple of the guys went up very, very close. I put my hand very, very close. One of the guys actually touched the Vajra, and it wasn't that hot. And when we were registering the heat, it was only, I think, maybe like 200 degrees or something. And we had it glowing like this. Ultimately, is that an explainable thing? Does that happen usually? And obviously, is this the Vajra resonating, or the plasmoids that we're seeing? Like, is this an effective resonance? Is the energy being imploded in?
What happened was, somehow or other, by the changes that were made by driving the engine, the resonant became more, let's say, in tune. It became more resonant, in tune. Just to give an example of the opposite, if I were to change some dimensions of the pipe or change some of the dimensions of the spheres, it wouldn't work the same way.
Yeah, I've got a number of first-hand accounts that is the case, and people calling up Malcolm, why isn't it working? Change it to an inch, or just follow that geometry. Yeah. It's very, very precise, and this is where we see that effect, and otherwise you don't see that effect.
Yeah, Malcolm's description of the Thunderstorm Generator as a musical instrument is absolutely precise.
Yeah.
Take an instrument, and now you change the tension on a string in a string instrument. You change the note, and if you do that, everything is out of tune. Every string is changed.
Mm.
You're out of tune. You've lost the resonance between one string and the next. Because music comes, the coherence in the music comes about because there's a relationship between the frequency of one note and the other. For example, the C and the G, the relationship that's called a fifth. The G is 1.5 times the C in frequency, which means the harmonics, the next harmonic for the G, 1 octave over, is 3. So you have these integer relationships in the ratios. That's coherence. Because now we have resonance not only at the main, we have resonances in the harmonics.
Yeah.
And that whole resonance makes the music beautiful. Change the pipe from being exactly what it is, the outer pipe and the inner pipe, and make the inner pipe, let's say, grow a little larger in one part, you'll destroy the resonance.
Yeah, it's not just about producing one note, but we've got a whole harmony and almost a fractal harmony going on within the Thunderstorm Generator.
In the manufacture of the spheres, the tolerance has to be very carefully monitored so that everything is close to the size that's the ideal size. And I think close to the size here, we're talking about not millimeters. We're talking about something that maybe is 100 times even smaller.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, it does seem to have a lot of tolerance, and you can certainly produce the effect within a range, as long as you keep quite close to it. Because obviously, there isn't always imperial standardized parts available, and people have experimented, but in every case, the best replications have been when people have precisely followed it to the T. And yeah.
And so here the tolerance is on the order of microns.
Yeah.
That's another indication of that it's a resonance effect. Now, tell you what's not known. How is the sizes of the spheres and the pipes and so on? Change the size, you get something different. How far do you have to be out before it becomes significant? Well, we know that it has to be in the tolerance has to be in microns. But why? If you ask the science behind that, I don't think it's known. What kind of resonance? Because the spheres are not resonating at, let's say, some audio frequency, like an instrument.
Yeah.
What kind of energy, what kind of connections there are, what kind of fields there are that are going on that are beyond like our knowledge of electromagnetic fields. There are other fields that are going on, that are there, but we don't know about them yet. And the resonance is not just at the quantum level. So that's what I talked about. It's quantum level resonance. But there are other things going on. For example, how does a molecule vibrate? There are 6 different ways that the you can have changes. For example, it could be in the valence electrons between the hydrogen and the oxygen. Where are they positioned? Six different ways. And that's at the molecular level. Then go up another level. If you go up another level, now you're at the level of the spheres. Why is the ratio 4:3:2? The one that seems to be the one that is the better ratios for this effect to occur in the thunderstorm generator. How far out do you have to be before the effect goes away, for example?
Certainly changing just from outer to inner diameter. Yeah, these things have certainly produced huge changes. So not very far out.
Yeah. So what happens when you change the length of the pipe that connect the spheres?
Yeah, which was what was done, but within ratio as well. So we saw that it started out as 24-inch, and then we got the stubby design, which is now 3 inches, and is a more reliable unit by all accounts so far.
But now we're talking at a macro level.
Yeah.
How does the macro level relate to the frequencies? I mean, if you talk about the frequencies of the electron at the quantum level, those are very, very high frequencies. But whatever is going on with the metals and the geometry and the pipes and the spheres, that's not at those
much lower. Yeah, it's a big hunk of.
It's much lower. And how is it that the one relates to the other? We don't know.
Yeah, well, I guess we're starting to think about just as simple as a fractal at that point, aren't we? You know, we observe phenomena acting in a certain way on one scale, and then we see it acting in very, very similar ways on a small scale. And, you know, maybe there is some differences there, but it would seem that there is a pattern. That just like a string, when we pluck it and we hear one note, but it's of course made up of a whole fractal of harmonics below that.
So I think the whole area is open for investigation to complete the knowledge of the full nature of the resonant effect. And it's the resonant effect that essentially is going on that is related to the coherence. So they're very interesting things that are happening. And when this gets opened up, there's going to be all kinds of new thoughts, new ideas in science, and they're going to be very useful. And these ideas are going to, let's say, change the dominance of the explosive mode to an implosive mode.
Yeah.
But you need the principles. And if you look at how how historically they work, the theory gets worked out between the mathematics and the physics. That gets handed to the engineers. Now they have equations. If you have equations, now you can start to do a design. And what do the engineers do? They want to create something that has this kind of an input and that kind of an output. But if I don't have the equations, I can't do anything. I can do, trial and error. But if I have the equations, system is made up of subsystems. Every one of the subsystems has a relationship between the input and the output. And mathematically, I can analyze the whole thing. And that's what engineers do. They do input-output analysis and do the design in such a way that the relationship they want between the input and the output is as specified. So it's the engineers that then turn it into a design, which then can go into manufacturing, and then whatever the new device is, it will add another one of these miracles, really. Why do I say miracles? If you think about it, every one of the new technologies and the old technologies that we use, from the point of view of creation, each one of them is a miracle. Of course, if when you get used to going to the wall and flipping a light switch that turns a light on, you think nothing of it. But that's a miracle. And if you have in your mind that this is miraculous, because this is all part of the creation that came from the source, it puts you in a different mode. It puts you in a different world, because now you're relating to the source.
Yeah.
And if you were to ask people like Galileo and Newton and so on, if you were to ask people who were the fathers of various aspects of science, you would find in their time they were very religious.
Mm.
They, in their minds, there was not a separation between God and the technology. It was all integrated. And then science comes along, and since it has the hypothesis that anything that's observed, we can figure it out, and we can figure it out, and then the figuring out doesn't involve the creator, so therefore creator is not needed.
Well, and it's a bit of an irony when, as you say, all of science has come from that. They were all religious men. They all believed in God, and ultimately, I would say that's where they got the information and how they got the information, because you simply can't reason these type of things out if you don't understand that there is intelligence, that this is miraculous, that yeah, there's a very
Well,
blurred
that
line
sort of brings
between
us, yeah, this brings us to
scientific science.
the spiritual side,
Yeah,
uh, which is not quite the same thing as the religious side, because we're talking about
that's true.
direct relations and appreciations and gratitude for what we have, and acknowledgement that is the creator is acting in our lives, each one of us. And each one of us is given our situations by the creator. And it's a blessing, even if the situation is a hard situation. It's a blessing. How can it be a blessing if it's a hard situation? Because in order to get through the situation, we have to make a change in ourselves. And the change in ourselves that we make brings us closer to the creator. And that's the blessing.
Hmm.
So science doesn't stand by itself as science often thinks it does.
Yeah.
There's a relation there that needs to be acknowledged and needs to be lived. All right, but that's another side of the science.
It is, but it is where all of this is leading, and ultimately we do have to question, what is science for? Are we simply just cataloging knowledge, and then who are we cataloging that for, and why? And so it brings you back to life, consciousness, God, and that's where we're all going to get eventually. I hope with this, but in the meantime, this is building that bridge ultimately.
Yes.
Understanding unification, this alpha ladder process, stepwise transmutation, and the idea that elements aren't particles. Because you're right, this is an easier way for us to comprehend things, and it's certainly how we all learn things, at least in this day and age. But really, they are frequencies, aren't they? This is information. It's not matter, or it is matter, but only manifests because it is moving at a certain rate and how we perceive that time dilation. So yeah, I think the work that you're doing is really important, and it is going to help build a bridge between Malcolm's more etheric and broad philosophy, because he says things incredibly simply and concisely, but often not with a lot of information that an engineer can use, as you can say. And so I think that your work's going to be very, very important in this, and in translating that and being able to practically apply this science in many other ways. Because as we know, it's not just about the Thunderstorm Generator. It has so many implications here, particularly the transmutation
Yes,
process.
and if you look at Malcolm's notes, you won't find anything that relate there to, let's say, our current science. But
Yeah.
interestingly enough, if you go back to Kepler,
Hmm.
the astronomer,
All
well
the
known,
foundations of our science, yes. Then we'll find all of it.
he wrote a book called Harmonies of the World. He analyzed the solar system. He used Pythagorean tuning, lengths of time around the sun, the orbits, and all of these kind of things. They were all related. And the frequencies involved were the frequencies in Pythagorean tuning.
So this is taking the macro up another scale, and we're talking about the celestial side of it, which is certainly, yeah, what Malcolm's really brought in here when he's suddenly talking about planets and then, a device and then plasmoids on a scale. Hmm.
Just a couple of years ago, there was an article that was published in a journal. It's a medical journal. And this area, a medical journal, it dealt with the glands and the hormones that the glands create. And this was a medical doctor. Do you know what she did? She took every gland in the body and looked at the fundamental hormone that gland generates. Some glands generates multiple ones. She's looking at the top one. Her analysis followed Kepler's analysis. The glands in the body go with the solar system, go with a Pythagorean tuning.
Hmm.
There's something fundamental here.
Yeah.
And
And
so
not just Kepler, of course, this is repeatedly recognized by many people. And I know you've been sending me some papers on this that's starting to explore Pythagorean tuning in so many aspects, especially in water and coherence domains and what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so this is not yet in the mainstream, but it's being noticed. Different people are noticing it from different areas. And it follows actually Tesla.
Yeah.
Tesla was talking about frequency. It was a fundamental thing. And the fact that the frequencies all go together in a way which is musical, that's a unity.
Yeah.
Just to give an example, this is more of a Malcolm example. The ratio of the spheres is 4 to 3 to 2. The diameter of the moon is 2,160 miles. In the Vedic mathematics, you can you ignore the zero, 216. 432 is double 216. You're an octave higher. The diameter of the sun is 864,000 miles. 864, that's double 432. The sun is on an octave higher than the spheres. But they're all in the same tuning system.
Hmm.
And the 432, This is the A above middle C in the Pythagorean tuning. What's the relationship here? We're talking about something that's on the order of some kind of a global thing. And where are the fields that relate the sun and the moon and Malcolm's spheres? That's another resonance. The same thing with the glands in the body and the hormones they create. They're on frequencies, and when you get to the frequencies, you're in a Pythagorean tuning. So this is where the science opens up. And of course, there are many inventions that are going to come out. I know Malcolm has a stack of them, and there are some other people also who are working with plasmoids. And these inventions are going to come out. And it does create a new aspect of the science. It will generalize the science in ways that are not yet fully, one cannot yet fully say what's going to happen. But certainly, it's going to involve the energy that is the random fluctuation energy, which people have long held you can't do anything with because it has it has high entropy and low energy. Non-usable.
Yeah.
And if you connect to it in the right kind of resonant way, you'll be able to draw energy out of it.
So essentially, the energy is all around us. It's there. This is just about how to harness it. We're not pulling energy out of nowhere, although ultimately, I guess the energy does come from nowhere in a sense. But the energy is there. It's manifest. We're just finding a way to structure it, use it, sustain it, and apply that science.
Yes, and I think that the people who are going to be working in this area, it's going to be very fruitful. And what has to be established are the relationships. We need to get to the place where we can write equations for everything that's going on. So Malcolm knew from his study of the ancient mathematics all of that needs to be incorporated into the science, into the mathematics, into the equations for all kinds of new inventions that'll be very important for society. And interesting enough, if these are the kind of inventions that are going to be able to use the energy from the quantum random fluctuations, that's going to change the politics between countries. Why? Because now we're in a world where the countries that are not fully developed but have resources, they're being taken advantage of by the countries that have power and have resources, like military resources. And what happens if free energy devices are able to be used in those countries for things like electricity? What happens is that society, which in today's term you might say is impoverished, they're going to have energy. It's energy that drives this society for advancement. It's energy, not money. It's energy. And so once the energy gets placed where it's sufficiently cheap and to manufacture and distribute, then those societies are going to rise. And the world changes. It changes in a way where the different countries are able to relate to each other as, in some ways, equals. Like people are supposed to relate to each other as equals.
This is an exciting prospect, really, and considering so much of this knowledge is contained in the histories of India and even the origin of mathematics and the numbers that we see ourselves, so much comes from there. So I am excited to see the effect that it will have on what we consider now as perhaps developing countries and maybe restore their rightful place, in a sense, in the world of science and industry.
I think that's exactly what's going to be happening.
Hmm.
And it's all resulting from technology, which actually, in certain ways, was ancient technology.
Certainly.
They didn't know about the technology in the ways that we know about the technology. They knew it about in different ways.
Yeah. And they sure knew about the numbers. Very, very specific numbers, all the ones we've mentioned, 432, 864. They knew about these numbers and they've been noted, as Randall Carlson's spoken about, all over the world, in so many different cultures, so many different structures. And I guess we should probably mention that there is a book being written on at the moment, Sacred Numbers, Key to Unlock Energy, which is being spearheaded by yourself, and I'm involved in and talking on those topics of harmonics and numbers and Vedic mathematics. The Thunderstorm Generator. Malcolm is obviously involved and one of the primary authors there, and as well as Sheila Rahman, who we're going to be talking to, and who is with you at TeslaTech, and Randall Carlson as well. So hopefully we'll be able to explore a lot of these ideas and talk about all of that, the ancient history, the numbers, the application in technology, the alpha ladder process, and the transmutation of elements.
Yes, this will be a start.
Hmm.
I don't know how complete all the relationships are going to come in the book, but it's going to be what can be put together in this length of time that we have, because we don't want to wait 5 years and then have the book come out much more complete. It's better that it comes out incomplete now, and we continue to work, attract more people. More people get started, and they'll have their own ideas and they'll develop.
Let the entire world in on the search, and
Exactly.
give the basis that
Exactly.
we have, which is a good and solid hypothesis, which is supported by the evidence that we've found, and I'm sure people will work this out in a lot of ways, just with that impetus.
All right. So you mentioned the relationship between frequencies and how do you get frequencies for the elements? This is actually an easy process. It was actually known since the 1930s or 40s. And it goes like this. You use two relations. There's a relationship between energy and mass. This is called the Einstein energy mass equivalence. Almost everybody has heard of it. E, the energy, is equal to m, the mass, c squared, which is the velocity of light squared.
I think I've heard of that, yeah.
So if I have an atom or a molecule, I have a frequency. Change the mass to the energy, and then use the Einstein-Planck relation, which changes energy to frequency. The frequency there is the frequency of the photon that would have the given energy. That's the tie. The energy of a proton of a photon that is oscillating, that photon carries an energy, and that energy is equivalent to a mass through these these two relations. So frequency, energy, and mass by these relationships are all the same. There was a paper that was published by the physical chemist, quantum physicist Mark Henry around 2017.
Mhm.
He was trying to make the point to people in the physics community that what's really going on is like a symphony. And he had a particular case that he worked out. He closed the paper by saying, look, let's just consider water. What's the atomic weight of water? Oxygen 16, 2 hydrogens each one, 18. He uses exactly this relationship to get to the energy, and then from the energy to the frequency. Now that frequency is way up in terahertz range. But then he uses the musical idea. Let's move it down octaves, 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 octaves. He moved it down something like 76 octaves. The frequency was 54 hertz to the nearest integer. 54 doubled is 108. 108 doubled is 216. 216 doubled is 432. They're all notes, but it's the same note.
Yeah, we can just bring it down an octave. They're going to interact the same harmonically. And yeah. And so this is what you've done as well in your table of the elements, bringing them down 73 octaves so we can start to explore those interactions. Oh, not interactions, harmonic.
We don't have to stick to one octave, because in the sense of this kind of equivalence by symphonic musical point of view, the note that you play in the audio octave and the note that you play in the kilohertz range, it's the same note. The same song can be up in kilohertz. It can be up in this octave to the next octave, the next octave. You would hear it as the same.
Yeah.
This is a concept that needs its development in the science. That what's really going on is not just the single frequency, multiple frequencies, even in certain cases in time sequence, which makes a melody. And not just one instrument, because the instruments are in different octaves. And that's what's really going on.
Yeah.
We're not yet up to working things in that way. And this is the importance of being able to make the conversions, which will help us then see the musical relation between things which are working together.
Yeah, I think a lot more music theory could be brought back in to explain physics. And it's, of course, we do have an understanding of sound and theory and harmonics and frequency and resonance, but actually the intervals between things and these more intricate relations between frequencies and numbers, they appear to apply. We are seeing this mark of Pythagorean tuning in on so many different scales when we look at things in terms of frequency, which I guess is why Nikola Tesla said we should look at everything in terms of frequency, because then suddenly a pattern emerges.
Yes, there's a real unification that is coming into being, and Malcolm has a very important place in getting this going. taking his volume of notes and little by little bringing it into the kind of expression which our science uses, and showing that it can help develop even science concepts which are not yet in existence, but will come as science advance. So Malcolm has done a great job, not only with the Thunderstorm Generator, which will cut down on the carbon dioxide that's emitted in cars, trucks, other kinds of transportation, which actually is a very, very small percentage of the total that the society creates. But then go to the coal plants that are burning coal to generate electricity. Then going to the generators, which are generating electricity, starting with the generators, which are the ones that turn on when the transmission lines get overloaded, and then to all of the generators that are being used at various substations to provide energy to the transmission lines. That's where a lot of the carbon dioxide comes.
Yeah, just these stationary plants and generators that are producing the majority of our power. And I guess that's one of the major advantages here, is that the Thunderstorm Generator can be retrofit to practically anything that produces some amount of carbon. And it itself is applicable in so many different areas. The science is another step again. We're really going to see a lot of change if this gets implemented. And I was just thinking before, when we were talking about bringing things down in frequency, down 73 octaves, ultimately this is what's happening with Malcolm Bendall. His notes are they're well ahead of anything I have read. Ultimately, it's he really is a genius, and a lot of people don't understand that yet. They're going to see it at some point, but we need to bring him down 73 octaves. So that he's in a frequency that people can perceive, and it will help things get there.
Yes, what's going to happen is it's going to be known to the public by what new inventions come into being using this kind of technology. So Malcolm has a very important role to play. One of the things that are going to come within the next couple of years are going to be plasmoid batteries. And these kind of batteries are not going to be rated in how much energy it can hold. And then when you spend the energy out, the battery needs to be recharged. It's going to be batteries that are continuously being recharged from the quantum fluctuations. And there'll be a battery that you can eventually have that will run all the electricity in your house. Batteries rated in kilowatt. Yeah. 20 kilowatts, 30 kilowatts. You can draw from these batteries, and the batteries last for decades. That's going to have a fundamental change. But it's all related to the science of the plasmoids, structured plasmas. And if you go look into the books on plasmas, you will not see plasmoids.
No, this isn't something that is taught, at least in most physics classes at this stage. But we are seeing that change gradually. And Malcolm and I have spoken about this several times, that, if you mentioned plasmoids a few years ago, well, we were just being called quacks, and Malcolm made up this term, and of course he didn't. It was termed by Winston Bostick, I believe, and
Yes.
they've been termed a lot of different things, but they've certainly been noted, talked about, and discovered long before this. But the past few years, Malcolm talking about this and Randall talking about this on the Joe Rogan show, this has really got this in the public awareness. And now there's no denial of plasmoids. I never really get comments anymore of, you guys are talking quackery. It's more, all right, now we need to work out what these things are. So I think everyone is moving that way. And we're in a really, really exciting time.
Yes, and we have we really have to acknowledge the work that Malcolm has put in to bring this about. He's had to work very hard. Why
Yeah.
do I say very hard? Because when you produce something that is so new and it doesn't fit the science paradigm, you get opposition.
Mm.
And it's very hard to work in a way in which you have opposition. It's much better if people know you're working on this. This is going to be very important for society. This is going to be great inventions.
Mm.
Then you have all kinds of positive feedback. But if you're so far different than the current science, it becomes negative. The history of this, by the way, has been written by Thomas Kuhn, Kuhn.
Mm.
The title of the book is The Structure of Scientific Revolutions.
Oh, yeah, you've mentioned this to me before. Yeah. Okay.
It was written in the late 1950s, like 1959, early 1960s. I read it a couple of years after it came out. He goes through the history and the struggles that scientists had who were introducing new ideas.
Mm.
Galileo, for example. Do you know he was imprisoned in his own house?
Yeah.
All because of what? He's saying we have observations, and the observations go with the sun being still in its place and the earth going around it, rather than the opposite, that the sun is going around the earth. How did that happen? Because in his day, it was the church that had the political power and had the science, so to speak. And the science didn't include this concept that the earth goes around the sun.
Yeah.
And it was declared to be something that was like almost like an offense to the creator.
Yeah. And this has been repeated throughout history. I'm sure
Yes.
we know many stories of it, and this is certainly what Malcolm has encountered now. Not just difficulty in getting these ideas taken seriously and having proper studies done on something that is being clearly observed, at this point, hundreds of times by hundreds of people, many qualified scientists. He's up against that, and he's also up against the fact that clearly some people have known about this information in the past. Like we can see that there has been a lot of declassified Navy research in particular. Um, and so I guess he's also had some issues with that repeatedly. And I guess any of us who get involved in this field to some extent usually see a few funny things happening. We've talked about computers being hacked and yeah, it's sometimes being directly approached, and I've
Well,
been
you
directly
have to look at
approached
it
and
from,
threatened, and Malcolm certainly has, and he's come up against far more than just people poo-pooing his ideas. So it's not an easy climate. He's really done the hard yards to get this out there, and I really admire him for that.
a couple of years ago. He was at my house. We had about 10 days together. And the second or third day, he shows me a text message that came from one of the highest specialists in the Department of Energy in the United States. And the question he was raising, does your invention violate the law of the second law of thermodynamics? This guy's a double PhD.
I think I've seen this email train. Please continue.
And Malcolm is ready to give him an answer. Malcolm's answer was a very short answer. You say it's a law. Actually, it's nothing more than a hypothesis. Malcolm uses even. They're just suggestions. He was going to, but I saw if he was going to answer it that way, it wasn't going to change this guy's mind. He'll just throw it away. So I asked Malcolm, give me a chance to write him a reply that you can send to him. And that's when I started to think about Thomas Kuhn and the structure of scientific revolutions. And he was asking it, the question that was being asked was certainly reasonable from the basis of where science was.
Yeah.
So it was not something crazy. It was reasonable. And the way I framed the answer was exactly as I hinted to before. Where are you starting from? Are you starting from the fact that science, in the stage it is currently, that this is the complete truth? Or are you starting from the observations, from the experiments as the truth? And if you start that science is complete true, something like the second law of thermodynamics, and then you find something that is not in accordance with that, then the science is true, the experimental evidence is false, and go figure out where you made your mistake in the experimental setup. That impedes the science because the science hasn't changed. But if you take the experimental evidence as true, having been replicated multiple times in multiple places with multiple engines, you take that as true. Now work it back into the science. Change the science. Then what happens? The science changes and therefore it advances. But if you want to set itself up so you ignore the physical experiments that have been done, if you just ignore it because they don't fit the science, how is science going to change? From the experimental side, it can't, you just impede the change. So I wrote this. Next day, he sends it to this person. The person got it. He understood. And further questions of that sort did not continue.
It's a good way to start off any scientific dialogue, really. And I think that most people outside of the scientific field, and myself included before this kind of became my field, although I haven't been to university, I'm not qualified, I always assumed that that's how science worked. Is that we saw things, because that's kind of what we say, but ultimately it doesn't always go like that. And it's a really important thing to note and to bring up. And I think it does make a lot of
think
pseudoscience
about this,
reconsider.
to see how it works into the way people live. Think about this from the point of view of, let's say, the scientist. How many years did they have to go through university, postdocs,
Hmm.
and then they're in a high-tech place or they're in a university place and they're writing papers and they get more expert and more expert and more expert. What happens? The more expert you get, it's, like your ego grows a little more and then a little more and a little more.
Perhaps the less open you become.
And now you can say your experiment is wrong because I'm holding to the science. Ego does not like change. But science advancement happens by change.
Yeah.
So it basically says that we have to have humility. If we have the right sense of humility, when new things that come along that are not in line with the current science, the proper move is to give it a chance, to explore the science, to see how it can advance to include the new results.
And ironically, this is often seen as arrogance, to present a new idea like this. But you're right. The opposite is true, that it's humility. Yeah.
And humility, by the way, is a spiritual concept. I mean, it's all of the religions will value humility as a virtue.
Hmm.
So it does require humility to be able to include something that was not in your frame of mind because you've closed it off by the current science. And with humility, you would accept the results and begin to explore them. Because exploring those results actually puts you to doing your real purpose, which was to advance science. That's what scientists are supposed to do, to advance the science. And if you knock out an experiment because it doesn't fit your current science, you're doing the opposite from what you really wanted to do, which was to advance the science.
Yeah.
Yes, and so this was very apparent with the kinds of things that were going on. An automobile that doesn't produce carbon dioxide. How is that possible? And that caused opposition.
Yeah.
But I think now we're breaking open with the kind of it's happening from the industrial side and the building of the automation process that is building these spheres within the tolerances required.
Mm-hmm.
The automobile companies that are beginning to step up to incorporate the technology.
Yeah.
The AI centers, which cannot be put on the transmission lines. They have to generate their own energy because they require too much energy and it would just topple the whole capability of providing electrical energy to the public.
Yeah.
They'll be working with generators. Guess what? Those generators that are going to be fitted right from the very beginning with the Thunderstorm Generator.
Yeah. It's come at a very critical time where it has been needed to be able to go to this next stage and roll out projects both in developing countries and in the US and
And
other parts of the West.
contracts for this. They're in process.
Yeah, I've been personally there to witness some of that as well. As of you, I know, and we are going to see thunderstorm generators everywhere soon. And whether or not scientists want to catch up with this technology, they are going to be forced to because it's going to be on their car or on their generator or producing their power. So ultimately, that's a good thing to have up our sleeves there. And one way to do things is to just push something out as a technology, and then the science is forced to catch up.
Well, forced would mean that they're initially against it. And I'd rather look at it in the positive way, that the curiosity, which is what drives scientists, is curiosity, that the curiosity is raised and then the attraction occurs.
Yeah, maybe I've become a little jaded, about things with the amount of criticism we've got over this time. But at the same time, no, you're absolutely right, and you're an exemplary example of that, of someone with incredibly serious qualifications, an amazing amount of experience, and quite a polymathic um, field of study. And yet you are taking this seriously, and you've seen the observable phenomena, and now you're coming up with hypotheses and trying to help us understand that. So science has a lot of hope, and there are certainly many other scientists out there like you. I guess maybe we could end on this note, unless you have anything further to say. But how can other people get involved in this science? Obviously, you can't just go to the nearest Plasmoid Institute because it doesn't exist currently. How can people get involved in this if they are currently doing their PhD, or they're involved in a university or leading a research team? What do we want to see? How can they help advance the science practically?
So from the coherence domain, I can tell you something, because this is relevant to biology, chemistry, and physics, but it's not mainstream yet. It cannot be denied because there are hundreds of papers in scientific journals now about coherence domains. It's just that hasn't yet reached to the main center of the physics, chemistry, and biology. You might ask, well, how does all of this pertain to the biology?
I've got an
All of
inkling,
water,
but I want to hear it.
all of the water that's in the body, interstitial water, it's all structured water. It's water that has excess of coherence domains. Why? Because the water is adjacent to fats or proteins, which are hydrophilic, water-loving. And that structures the water and it increases the coherence domains. Take the Chinese meridian system, where the meridians are actually marked out if you go to the textbooks. And then if you try to do your anatomy study, well, let's try this meridian that goes from A to B here in the body. And you go look for it right in those places. And you're looking by eye. You know what? You won't find it. However, if you take sections and put the sections under a scanning electron microscope, yes, you're going to find things. These meridians, they're only so many nanometers in diameter. And what's around that? It's, for a lack of a better word, I'll say structured water with a lot of the coherence domains. And guess who's traveling through that water? Plasmoids. So you have the water with the coherence domains, and the plasmoids are carrying the energy from one place to the other. They're water plasmoids, the same plasmoids in the engine.
Yeah.
Take another thing, homeopathy. It's really crazy, according to science, traditional. You put your active ingredient in, and then you shake it really hard, and then you dilute it, and you repeat this 10 times, 15 times, 20 times. Hey, by the time you get to 15, 16, 17 times, the probability that's even a molecule left of what you started is zero. Now, if you go back into the, let's call it the old stream way of looking at things, that says the body is nothing more than a chemical factory, and everything can be understood through the chemical transactions, and you don't have any chemical, then you can't have any transactions, and they must be useless. The placebo effect. That's sort of the mainstream argument. But do you know what? What happens when they shake? Shake it real hard, you begin to get bubbles of all different sizes. And the ones that are important are the small ones. And just what's happening in the bubbler is happening in the process of the homeopathic process itself. It's creating the bubbles, some of which are small, some of which are going to cavitate, some of which are going to form the plasmoids. So where is the memory of the homeopathic, which lasts for years? It's in the plasmoids.
Yeah.
Where in the plasmoids? It's in the oscillation that's going on in the coherence domain. Somehow that oscillation gets modulated. How, I don't know. And the plasmoids last a long time. That's what makes the homeopathic process very interesting from the new science point of view.
It does. Probably a lot of people know about, was his name Luc Montagnier,
Luc
the guy who did,
Montagnier.
the transmission
Luc
of.
Montagnier, the co-discoverer of the HIV virus. And he did an amazing experiment. He took DNA from an HIV patient, put it into a test tube with water, and then went through the entire homeopathic process 15, 16, 17, 18 times, shaking, diluting, shaking, diluting. Here I'm just talking about the shaking process. Then puts the test tube in a coil, a solenoid, connects the solenoid to a preamp into the audio card on a computer, and records an MP3 file. He's working in France. He sends the MP3 file to colleagues in a laboratory in Australia. How many thousands of miles away? He sends it. They take the test tube, put water in it, put the test tube in a solenoid, and play back the MP3 file that Montagnier sent to them. After they play it back, they put the nucleotides, the 4 nucleotides, into the test tube, and a polymerase, which then stitches them all together. And then they look at they sequence the DNA that results. The first experiment, which Montagnier did, must have been probably on the order of 2012 or so, there were 102 base pairs. And the very first experiment yielded, when they sequenced it, 100 out of 102 base pairs. When I met Montagnier in 2017, he was already doing this replication with 600 base pairs. This is impossible. Sending frequencies, as actually there were blips, sending that thousands of miles. You can't argue there's contamination now. There's no physical relationship.
Yeah.
It was just frequencies that were sent.
Certainly the frequency, yeah.
And you're able to replicate the DNA. And the big question is, where is the memory? The memory is not held by the water, it's held by the plasmoids.
By the plasmoids, yeah.
And you know, when you talk to Malcolm, he'll tell you the plasmoids last a long time.
Yeah. And they provably do. We find the effect in the engine. You could leave it there for months potentially and then run it, and there could be plasmoids still embedded in it. Once they find a home, they will sit there and sustain themselves, it would seem.
Yes. And this is the basis of the science that will come out. It will come out. It will be published. And that'll make the homeopathic process part of mainstream medicine.
Yeah.
All because of the plasmoids. We'll just watch the literature. You'll see it within 3-4 years. It'll come out in its glory.
So I guess the moral of this story is that if you are a scientist, no matter what field you're in, whether it be biology or engineering, there is something to do with the science. There's something to explore here. And plasmoids are the basis of it. This is the commonality and the unifying factor, is they are one of these first forms in an atomic battery that can carry energy and frequency and cause a lot of different things to happen, including transmutations. So I think, is there anything else you'd like to share, Robert, or we may otherwise end around now? I think we've been going on for a little time now, and yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks so much for coming on to chat today and following up on your presentation at TeslaTech and the announcement and of this whole alpha ladder hypothesis on the transmutation process. It's very exciting times, and I think you're a very valuable voice in this field, and in combination with Malcolm in particular, we're just seeing a lot of very exciting stuff happen right now. So thank you, Robert. I'll link to all of your resources.
I'm glad to share. It'll perhaps open eyes of people who will then be more curious and get into the science area and then have it in their mind to do the exploration. So all of that is good.
Yeah, I've got absolutely no doubt. All right. Well, thank you very much, Robert. And I'm sure we'll be talking more. I'll be posting up your lecture from TeslaTech that was done off in the side room there, and then we'll be following up with this interview, so people will be able to go and explore more about these ideas if you go back and look at some of the other content posted on the channel, and this will possibly be on other platforms as well. So thanks again, Robert, and I'll
wish
you a good night.
Thank you for doing all the work that you're doing with your podcasts. Bringing people new information.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be on the front lines of this and seeing all of this in real time. So yeah, I'm very grateful.
So have a blessed and productive week. Look forward to talking to you other times as well.
Yeah, and yourself. Look forward to seeing you again, Robert. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this fantastic interview with Robert. Keep an eye out for the next video in the Alpha and Omega Ladder series coming in 2 days' time. In this next part, we'll hear from the frequency scientist Sheila Rahman, who joined Robert at TeslaTech 25 and also did a lecture off in a side venue during the conference, which is what we're going to show first. So I've worked together on several projects with Sheila before, and she's quite brilliant. Her way of thinking and experimenting are unique, and her work has done a great deal towards bridging the gap between music and physics. So I think you'll really enjoy Sheila's lecture and my follow-up interview with her to come later in this series. I'm Jordan, and this is Alchemical Science. So thank you to you all for supporting and being a part of the radical and unfiltered advancement of science. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.